On today's podcast, we had a phenomenal guest, Dr. Zach Bush. I really enjoyed the conversation with him. I've been a fan of Dr. Zach for at least a decade. Tremendous human being doing really important work on the planet, both from a global level and a deep dive personal level. We traverse so much terrain in this conversation. And I'm also beyond excited that he's going to be coming to the Okanagan to the New Human Regeneration event that we have October 4th to 6th, 2024. We're going to get together in person. This is an in-person only event. It's not going to be live streamed. We're holding this container of beautiful healing, regeneration, connecting, community, and really coming together through the heart. So I hope you enjoy today's authentic conversation with Dr. Zach Bush. We'll see you on the other side.
If God isn't a man, then what is it? And I think what we're slowly getting our heads wrapped around, it is the witness. It is the nature that can see the nature. And we've proven this in physics now, that nothing is actually in particle state until it's witnessed.
All right. Dr. Zach Bush, welcome to my podcast, and just beyond grateful to have you on today and see where we go, see where our hearts lead us, and share that into the world. So thank you so much.
Kevin, it's a real pleasure to be with you, all the audience included.
Wow, lovely. So there's obviously so many elements. You're such a diverse human being, and as I was tuning into this, I was out in the forest a little bit, just, feeling into maybe where to go and, certainly inviting for the highest to drop in. And so I might just invite that right now, actually, if we both just take a deep breath. And I'm just going to share some intentions that our conversation today be of the highest value for the planet, for humanity, for ourselves, that our hearts are nourished and filled up by this chance to interact, and that there's always space for magic to unfold and, see what wants to be spoken into. And so, I'm excited to just flow together. And, certainly I suppose one of the big things that is brought together is we're doing an event in October up here in the Okanagan in BC called the New Human Regeneration. And thank you for, feeling the pull, I guess, and saying yes to come and join us. And I'm curious, when's the last time you've been to BC or even Canada? I'm kind of curious what your footprint's been like here.
Yeah, it's been a couple of years. I don't think I've been up there since before the pandemic, honestly. So it's been a while, and Canada was a tricky place the last few years to get in and out of.
It was, yeah, for us on this side too. We weren't able to interact with our neighbors south of the border very easily. And, really grateful that, and even the last few years here doing bigger in-person events and things, that's one of the most exciting things for my heart is the in-person connection of, it seems like people really rowing in the same direction or being in the river of life together. And I know you generally are probably traveling a ton wherever possible and traversing the globe and activating maybe different sites on the planet, and they're probably activating you. And really curious right now too, and any extremely exciting things that you're working on. And I'm sure you got a list of 100 things, but is there anything that's especially on your heart right now that you're putting a lot of time and energy into?
Yeah, my time is balanced between quite a few projects right now, but the ones that I think there's a couple that I think are really poised now to really change global discussions around a couple of industries that are really desperately needing some innovation. One of them being around energy. And so we've spent the last 8 years at my company building out a subsidiary that's working on the second largest problem behind the herbicides when it comes to human biology, which is microplastics. And so our first company was Biomic Sciences, and we innovated soil extracts as an antidote to the herbicide damage done in human cells. And so it turns out that nature had a solution before we created that massive injury. We pour about 4 billion pounds of Roundup or glyphosate into our global soils annually now. And I'm starting to really be convinced that nature's never allowed an injury to occur that didn't already have a solution. And so that's something that I think we need to just lean into, the grace of nature, that, we're really stinking this place up. We're making mistakes in almost every single industry. As consumers, we are destroying the planet. We need to rethink our own role on the planetary scale, from consumer back to producer again. Everybody was productive back in the day. If you weren't being productive, you weren't part of society in so many ways. And so production was measured in all kinds of different ways. And it was not just, in fact, it was rarely measured by economic output. But now we've got to the point where people are only measured by economic productivity. And therefore, we are driven to success by being consumers rather than being producers ultimately. And so this area of energy is really begging for a transition, as well as our health industry and food systems. And so our science around food systems convinced us that nature's got solutions to these massive problems, and microplastics are really disruptive to the endocrine system, very similar to glyphosate or the active ingredient in the herbicides that we're dealing with. And so we started tackling that issue and pretty quickly discovered that microplastics look a lot like glucose under the microscope. And so got basically a long chain carbon, which is glucose or fatty acids or plastics. And so interestingly, as we take a plastic bottle and it starts to deteriorate, it will eventually get down into these long carbon chains. And that's why they're disruptive to biology, is they mimic, biologic chemicals so similarly.
Mm-hmm.
So in looking at that molecule, the idea was, my goodness, there's a lot of energy pent up in these plastic waste streams that we have globally. Why aren't we converting that to energy? And the thought process for me as a biologist was, if we just had a bunch of 40-foot mitochondria around, we'd have no plastic problems, because mitochondria are the masters of breaking long chain carbons down into shorter chains and releasing energy in the meantime. And the fuel that all of our vehicles run on is a carbon-based, process that we're pulling out of fossil soil, or that we call oil, and that oil is converted to gasoline and diesel. It turns out that plastics can also turn into those same byproducts, and so plastics can go into petrol or diesel as well, because they can be broken down to the same carbons that we would break oil down to. And so the refinement process of oil is very similar ultimately to the refinement process of plastics. And that got us into all the other carbon waste streams that are a problem for humanity, which are tires. Our tire industry dumps an amazing amount of toxic materials into our dumps globally, or we burn them into the atmosphere, leaving an incredible chemical trail behind that waste stream. And then from a respiratory standpoint, the largest problem on the planet is the burning of agricultural waste. And so at the end of the season, after you've collected your rice, wheat, corn, soy, whatever it is, most farmers around the globe are still burning that biomass into the atmosphere, leaving a very large percentage of these large carbon molecules called PM2.5 floating around, which triggers our respiratory pandemics. And so you can't actually have a respiratory pandemic unless you have a large fire burden the year before. And that's, of course, what happened in 2019. We had the biggest fires in history and all over the world, but Australia got famous for them. But middle of Central America, middle Africa were also burning at that time. So the whole southern hemisphere was on fire. And then we saw, the opportunity for viruses to travel differently in the following year. 2020 hit, and all of the numbers of viral infections were dropping, and fires all up and down the west coast of North America burned, and again, Central Africa, Central South America. And, we went through a whole second season of respiratory. So we have to have fires at that scale before viruses travel readily and start to clump to cause problems for the human immune system. And so those three problems, plastics, tires, and agricultural waste, are really setting up much of the health crisis that we have around the planet. And if that's all along carbon chain, why aren't we just converting that to fuels and replace our fossil fuel industry? Was the dream. So dream started 10 years ago. We started getting busy about 8 years ago, and we turned on the first 40-foot mitochondria in February of 2022. And so it's been a really exciting couple of years watching that whole process go. So we went from a biologic model and turned it into a thermal physics
model. And so we use the same 8-step process that mitochondria use through enzymes. We're using through a thermal process. And so we have each reactor handles about 100,000 pounds of waste a day. And so we've spent the last 2 years scaling up all of our engineering and all that around the mitochondrial concept to be able to handle all the ins and outs of the waste and refining materials on site and all of those things. So it's been a giant project, but it's one of those things where you can feel the energy of the planet helping. Like when you're actually in the stream of solutions, nature is really stepping alongside you these days. So encourage all of you to think really big blue sky, like everything everybody's told you is impossible before. You can't run your vehicle on water. You can't, clean up, waste. You can't do this or that. You can't get microplastics out of water. All the things you've been told. Just chuck all that out the window. Nature is ready for her comeback, and she's doing it in mighty ways. And so I've really felt and seen nature come alongside of us at each point where we thought we were stuck, opening up our hearts and minds to new possibilities within the natural systems have really been a beautiful way to move. So encouraging all of you just to shake off the old dust and dream big and do something spectacular. So Resource Dynamics is the name of that company, and it's got a lot of my attention. On the other side of the equation, planetary biology is really a passion of mine as far as how does this one single organism that we call Earth, how does it breathe? How does it process waste? How does it create energy? And that's been something that we've been focused on with a nonprofit called Project Biome for the last 5 years. And out of the gates, we realized that if we changed our relationship to nature, nature would come right back online and do what she does best, which is increase biodiversity, increase energetics of the planet, increase adaptation, and get past this extinction threat that we've created by being disconnected by nature. So Project Biome is focused on soil, water, and air as kind of 3 categories of relationship rebuilding for humanity. And through that, we created Farmer's Footprint, which focuses on regenerative agriculture and kind of advancing the understanding of soil biology and soil relationships back to the household, back to the municipality. And now we're working at the global level in Africa to start to think about how the whole countries and how the whole continents start to realign themselves through a 3-step process of rewilding rivers and coastlines and regenerating agricultural soils and then reconnecting economies to nature. And so it's rewilding, regeneration, and reconnect are the 3 R's that we're traveling through with Project Biome. And it's a very focused way of saying nature's got a way of doing all of this. How do we align our natural systems that we're living within with the industries that we're creating from? And it's been an interesting thing. It's similar to the waste to energy concept. Nature knows no waste, and so there can't be poverty in a natural system. So if we've created poverty somewhere, it's because we broke the natural system. We disobeyed the systems of natural law. So natural law is a big passion of mine, and it's kind of expressing itself in Project Biome there as we create a whole constellation of nonprofits all over the world now that are aligning on those 3 R's and starting to move forward projects, starting the southern portion of the African continent, and we'll be moving ultimately up to Egypt. There's 5 big river systems that define that birth canal of that continent. And that's where all life has come from. First bacteria, first humans, all of that, starting on the bottom base of the east coast of South Africa and then running up the 31st longitude up through Ethiopian Rift Valley, up through Cairo, Egypt with the pyramids, and on up through Eastern Europe and all the way up into Scandinavia. So that 31st parallel somehow is extremely energetically tuned to bring forth the energetics of the planet to really be that birth canal of diversity for billions of years. And so we're witnessing the opportunity to really allow that birth canal to come back online. And it does so every 20,000 years. Every 20,000 years, North Africa turns green again. And she's getting ready to do that. And the animals are starting to amass to do that. Specifically, the elephants down in South Africa and Botswana are starting to really mount their population, 300,000 excess elephants in that region. And they're starting to deforest all of Botswana and all that because they can't move right now. The fences that we've put up in the name of mostly conservation, but also just private ownership from multinationals, Americans, et cetera, that are owning Africa. we tend to fence everything, push indigenous peoples, plants, animals into non-natural systems and behaviors. And by doing that, we break the natural law of the continent. We're desertifying Africa very quickly. So we need to give up the colonial model very quickly, allow the elephants to take that continent back to their own flow. And the elephants are the great architects of the rivers. And so we know those rivers are going to start flowing quickly again when those elephants start walking. So land bridges from north to south will get that grasslands back in action. And when North Africa turns green, as it does every 20,000 years or so, the whole planetary biology goes berserk. So much new life, so much new biodiversity and all that. So for all this talk about climate crisis and, extinction and everything else, yes, very quickly if we keep the course. But if we just simply stop doing what we do, release nature, we won't believe how fast she takes her next breath. And then all that CO2 in the atmosphere, which is actually still a very small percentage of our atmosphere. But when that next breath is taken, that CO2 is going to turn into grasslands across Africa, the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, out into North India, Siberia, North China. That whole 1/3 of the planet is currently in desert. Naturally, will go back into grasslands as it always does. And so the Earth is ready to take her breath. And so I get pretty passionate about the opportunity to tell humans to maybe stop for a moment and take a breath ourselves. And in our breathing, I think we can find space for nature to show us a path forward.
Wow. So many things that I'm excited about and what you shared. Thank you for that. And I'm going to do that, is just take a breath and digest that through my system, that my lens, like through the clinic in the last 15 years and, really following your journey over maybe a decade or so and feeling so many parallels. And I'm sure a lot of my dialogue has been informed by Zach Bush's dialogue on, podcasts and things, that it makes so much sense to me, of one layer at a time, as I started to go deeper into practice and treating patients, that circle around them would just get a bit bigger and a bit bigger. And I would see things in a very isolating way, even from a Chinese medicine lens, which is my background. And I did science prior to that. My mom was a nurse. I have a diverse background within medicine, that I used to see things on like one part of a whole and then a few more parts. And now when I treat somebody, I wonder about their whole family system. And so some of these concepts of like a 40-foot mitochondria makes me imagine, what are our mitochondria doing in our systems to be able to either digest or not digest, plastics and toxic, elements and all these things that we're bombarded by, and sort of the colonial model of all the ways that we've isolated our environment inside our bodies between the organs. And so I'm now more looking at bigger picture things. And so following your journey of clinical practice, cell biology and all those pieces, and then working on global aspects, has really expanded many things for me. But even in the individual sessions that I'm doing and treatments and things, I'm thinking with the lens of a lot of what you've shared now, that, gosh, nature doesn't make mistakes, and nature has all these answers. And luckily, for the herbal medicine background, I have kind of had that woven into much of my practice anyway, that if there's emergent new toxins or, things that are new for the human body, then nature's going to provide some kind of balance in the yin and yang to be able to, interface with that in our bodies, that there'll be solutions that we need. And so seeing a 40-foot mitochondria with my own eyes gets me excited. I'll be thinking about that later today for sure. But then also the parallels. So I'm curious from an individual point of view, that these are the bigger concepts happening on the planet from within our own bodies. I know you have intrinsic health series and online programs and things for people. That might be an avenue. And I'm wondering if we can kind of take that into the body a little bit. And even what you mentioned around, smoke, living in BC here, gosh, the last 5-6 years, maybe 4 out of 6 years have been incredibly smoky, really big fires through the whole province, some in very close proximity to here, and being on evac notice a few times through that process, and, feeling very fortunate that none of the consumables in my life got, transformed by fire, but many other people did. And then what I would see in the clinic the year after is, allergies, and this year too, because it was quite smoky here last year, and there was a lot of fires and a lot of local fires, that most of my patients this year are reporting, like, I've never had allergies and now I do, or they're not that bad, but this year they're horrendous. And I'm looking at the trees, I'm in the forest, and it seems like the trees are maybe under strain and stress and offloading so much like pollen. And my curiosity was, I think they might be detoxing and rewiring themselves in that communication network to everything's trying to bring balance. So I know I'm weaving a few threads here, but kind of curious about the process of the human body, seeing the macro that you're talking about, and for the micro of how can we take some more steps in that direction inside?
Yeah, I think you're spot on. I know you're spot on, actually. It's been our experience across my clinics all the way to these big energy projects, the big, continental efforts, is you actually can't achieve any of these large goals until you start at the individual. Biology changes within seconds, physics changes within milliseconds, human behavior changes every 30 years. And so it's like we're just like creeping along in our capacity for change, because the human mind is linear in its ability to kind of dream new dreams or accept new information. And so when you come with a massive amount of new information that just doesn't fit in the common paradigm, it takes many, many years. And so this was known at academia when I was developing chemotherapy. I made a big breakthrough in vitamin A compounds. I was so excited. I was like running around telling all my colleagues, and like run down the hall to the oncology, suite, and telling them that there's this new thing. And they just all chuckled at this, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed kid who was so naive. They're like, "That's great. Every day somebody comes up with a laboratory solution that we won't see in our lifetimes." And that was really sobering. And it did. I was quickly introduced to the whole pathway, and it was clear that breakthrough happens in a laboratory. You prove it out in humans. I got from benchtop all the way to human trials in record time in just 2 years, and it would be another 20 years before that would become any sort of standard of care. And as it turned out, the pharmaceutical companies already anticipated some of the science that I was coming out with, and it put a bunch of blocking patents, so it will actually never come to market, probably, at least in my lifetime. So frustratingly, information travels slowly because the human mind is so slow to accept paradigm shift. And we really can't. And so we have to wait for these linear, kind of mounting change processes to occur. So this is where we don't have time, and we don't have time for some linear change in human behavior. We got to go exponential now. And so we spend most of our time in Project Biome. Instead of letting the elephants loose, we have to go to individual, peoples and government officials and sit them down. And instead of telling them the science and what needs to happen, give them a moment to reflect on how miraculous they are, and give them time to think about the fact that they're one of 8 billion people that birthed on the planet right now. And then give them an opportunity to redream their own identity. If you stepped in as a government official right now, what's the likelihood you didn't come to be part of the solution? Like, what's the likelihood you showed up in a human body right now as a soul animating? So take them on a journey where they realize, I have to be a change maker, else I wouldn't have shown up. The whole planet, humanity, economies, militaries, is all in crisis. And so what's the likelihood I showed up just to be on the journey of death? And so inviting that moment of kind of recalibrating our own identities is a big beginning point. And that's our 8-week program. That's the whole first week before we even talk about anything about food or anything about the environment or toxins. Got to start at self-identity. And that self-identity is the new foundation for humanity. And it gets me pretty excited. So my first book is coming out. I'm almost done with the full manuscript and getting that over in September. So it'll come out next year. But it's called Human, and it's about the human identity. Because after my 50-year journey so far, I'm very sure that if we restart the human self-identity back within our natural state, we will immediately express a new humanity. We'll immediately express a new society, new technologies, new industries, all of this, because we will simply be coming from a different perspective. And the lens of a microscope is such a potent way of looking at this. When you suddenly twist that objective on the microscope and you go from 10x to 100x magnification, it changes your whole perception of what was real just a moment ago. And so that's, I think, our effort right now in a single exam room with a patient or doing it in groups around the world. We have to activate that 100x, microscope look at self-identity of the human. And as soon as you get that moment where you're like, oh my gosh, I had no idea I was so beautiful. I had no idea I am such a miraculous healing machine. Everything is taking me on a pathway to ascension. My relationships that I thought were broken, my relationships that I thought had failed, my job that I was frustrated at, everything is poised. My immune system that feels like it's activated because I have allergies now. All of those things are there to take your body, your mind, your spirit on this ascension pathway, because it's all biology does. Biology is always on this ascending pathway towards more complexity, more intelligence, more beauty, more diversity. That's 4 billion years of history, incarnate. And so we are ascending, and the destruction of the planet has led to the largest paradigm leaps in ascension. And so you get more life after each stressor the planet happens in. And so whatever stressor you're in right now as an individual, you're putting many cell populations in your body under extinction level stress from the chemicals in your food, microplastics that are coming out of your washing machines. You're just toxifying the body. And in all of that stress, you're building a new opportunity to have a different body, a new body. And so when the stress does stop, the genes are going to be literally different that you express at that moment. And so a period of stress on the planet leads to great rebirth. A period of stress in your life leads to great rebirth. And so taking those pauses, as you have a couple times on this podcast, is enough to begin that process. So I haven't taken a breath in 3 months because I've just been fight or flight, fight or flight, fight or flight. If I just stop for just a few seconds, take a few breaths, reorient to my original design, which was me self-organizing 70 trillion cells in my mother's womb. What can I possibly worry about? I did that. I actually took one cell and became 70 trillion and organized that into dozens of organ systems that all collaborate through quadrillions of information streams. I burned 10,000 times brighter than the sun at the biologic level. Like, it's such an insane identity that I have as a biologic being, let alone a human being, that to stress is simply a construct of the mind at this point. Nature always takes stress as opportunity. Nature always does stress for adaptation. And so we need to see our current human journey as a process of massive adaptation to exit our previous identity as consumers and empires and the rest.
There's these elements of a few things that surface, things I've heard over the years, that it's not where you start and where you finish, it's the difference in between. And what you're saying is invoking in me this sort of visual I've had over the years, that I've been passed the baton from my ancestors, and I'm gonna run with that as much as I can in my life to move that forward. So when I pass that baton to my 2 kids, there'll be a big difference in between. There'll be a shift that will happen, even if that doesn't happen with everybody around me. And I have had a lot of fears around that of, these aspects of, studying human design or astrology or whatever. And it says, Kevin, you're designed to go first. And I'm like, I don't know if I want to go first all the time. It's kind of scary. And I feel like you've come up against that likely again and again and again, with the massive amount of difference in between, probably in your own perspective, from 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. So I'm really fascinated by how have you kept that vision when you see sometimes the linear aspect happening and you see so much more, that I know you're going to find a way that seems like that's just your nature, and maybe it is nature moving through you that continues to draw that forward. And there's still the human element that, if we get sort of jaded or see the different things and the immensity, once you see more, you can't unsee it. And then digesting that. So I imagine it's been a lot to digest for you as a person, being very interconnected in the planet. And so I'm curious if there's any parts along the way that really helped you continue, when maybe there was that moment, I'm imagining, where I don't know if I want to continue, and maybe a person, maybe an experience or something awoke that next layer within you, and then it unfolded. And just curious in your memory banks if there's any moments that come to your heart right now of maybe there's so many, I'm sure, with who you've become.
Yeah, I think probably most people on the planet right now, we've been forced through a reality that's been a pressure cooker of change, basically. And up until this time, humanity has really resisted change on a lot of levels. For as innovative as we tend to be, we've created all kinds of structures to try to avoid change. We've created giant economic things to make sure that there's still money for our children in the future. And though that's a ridiculous concept because money's nothing, it's a bunch of ones and zeros in bank accounts. And why would we be concerned that our children don't have nothing in ones and zeros in their bank accounts? So we have all these artificial stressors. So when I start to give up hope, I have to remind myself, why am I trying to preserve a false reality? And so a huge clap of thunder just happened behind me. That timing was good. So why are we trying to preserve reality? Because nature is trying to change it. Nature's always changing all of the time. We build houses. My house is kind of falling apart right now. I've built it in the woods of Virginia where it's so humid and the water just like digests it. The bees are digesting it. All of my carpenter bees are eating my house. The woodpeckers eating the carpenter bees out of the walls. It's dissolving faster than I am, I think. And so watching that process of a house that's not toxic but is part of nature, you realize, oh, this is, I never put any chemicals into this thing to keep it from decomposing. So the natural state of this house is it's always going to have to be regenerating. And so new boards are going to have to be put there. We're going to, there's going to be new, oak on the front, and all kinds of things are going to have to keep changing because it's a biologic entity. And so how do we start to design that way? How do we start to design for obsolescence and rebirth? And that's something that we should think about with our cars more, and the clothes we put on our backs and everything else is what after you've been done with that shirt for 2 years, where is it going to end up? And how do we plan for the obsolescence to give rebirth to biodiversity and more energy on the planet than ever before? Because like plastics and tires, our amount of apparel waste on the planet is just absolutely appalling, and poisons rivers, does all kinds of things. So we got to close the loop on all these things. So when I give up hope, I remember, okay, I'm hopeless in a state of false reality. Humans are not separate from nature. We went through a crisis of identity that convinced ourselves of that. We went through a deep schism of abandonment disorder as a disease for humanity for a few thousand years, maybe tens of thousands of years. And in our abandonment disorder, we got addicted to everything. That's the natural reaction of a human brain to abandonment, is addiction. And so I would say that humanity as a whole has an addiction problem. We're an addict as a species. And so we can point to people that identify themselves as alcoholics or whatever it is, but the reality is humans are addicted to the drugs that palliate our belief that we're separate from nature. Sometimes this is shopping at Target. Sometimes this is, buying a tea at Starbucks, whatever it is. Like, these are all addictions to palliate the belief that we've been left behind by nature and the fear that everything's going to change and we don't have any control over that. And so that we create all kinds of false structures and all of this. And then we stress out that the house is falling apart instead of realize, oh, thank goodness the house is changing because I'll go move or I'll build a new one or do things or whatever it is. Like, historically, that's how humans moved. Down in the Amazon jungle recently with the Achuar tribe, they rebuild all of their houses every 10 years because they build them out of natural materials and they burn it down to the ground at the 10-year mark, understanding that if they don't, disease starts to set up within the home and there's a lack of biologic strength and vitality within the place. And so a very interesting thing that they are building with materials that are provided right there locally by nature. And they're beautiful homes, vaulted ceilings that are 30 feet high, just massive, palatial homes that they build, and they have no kitchen because the Amazon rainforest has been providing food for them every day for 40,000 years. And so the thought of needing to store something is ridiculous. And so this is how humanity once persisted, was in a constant state of regeneration and provision and gifting from nature. And when we got afraid that we got kicked out of nature, we developed all these habits of ownership and fencing. And this is my house. This is my yard. This is my, thing. This is my company. This is my intellectual property. This is my patent. This is what I'm doing. And so that's where we develop poverty. That's where we develop poverty of spirit and soul and mind and creativity, is in that schism between the natural state of abundance that nature has been providing forever and this belief of scarcity that comes out of abandonment. And so for that, I can witness that myself every day, and I can go into these scarcity miles. I get extremely frustrated at myself and humanity as a whole on a daily basis. And in that process, I surround myself with community that holds moments of optimism, and we tend to help each other out, because I might be down and out at 2 p.m., but somebody else is going to hit the fence at 6 p.m. And so by having as much community around you that really is always lifting you and reminding you that we're all on an ascension path, when problems happen, it's for a good reason. We don't understand why yet, but in hindsight, it'll come clear. And if not, it's because we've moved on to the next opportunity and we didn't even care that it was a problem before. And so these are the cycles that we need to really accelerate each other in. And I'm not sure that we need to be super happy or joyful or optimistic. I'm not positive that's even necessary. I think nature comes through us in times of depression as well. And so I think I had some pretty deep depression about 13 years ago, and it was my total rebirth. Like I would still be at academia if that hadn't happened, probably. So we need these moments of collapse just as much as we need to pick ourselves back up. And so it's a reminder that celebrate it all. Celebrate the moments. Like, I've had a rough day today. Like, nothing has gone well today. But I know it's because everything was going so well the last few weeks. I wasn't seeing the opportunities. I thought the last few weeks was as good as it could get. And the stressors of today are showing me, no. You got to dream bigger. Got to go bigger. The last few weeks have been great in preparation for you to have enough energy to make this next transformation. And so you got your tank filled up, you got new fuel, you thought everything was great. Now you got new challenges. Jump again, because now you got the energy to do it. So it's a constant process. I would say I'm not good at it. I'm not the most joyful person I hang out with, that's for sure. But I do have this like overwhelming feeling underneath the skin that it's all freaking perfect. And even if it feels terrible, that's perfect too. And that's where I try to give that big permission slip. It's like, it doesn't have to be cheery. It doesn't have to be optimistic. I don't have to trust humanity. I don't have to believe that humanity is going to make it through. Nature is going to do nature. And if we surrender to that quickly, we'll be able to continue with her.
Thank you. I had some visions of what you're sharing, imagining you as a different animal in the forest and how all the animals play their role. And I've been particularly connected with what I'd call bear medicine the last couple of years here locally. And I tend to see them a lot in the woods and in the wild, and imagine, what kind of role that they get to play in their day to day. And then, the woodpeckers and the deer and the elk and the moose and the microbes and everything else. And so to me, in that trust and surrender, then we each have a unique design here and a role to play here that nature's perfectly orchestrated in some way. And that is evolving all the time. And, even some of what you shared around the new humanity, of course it invokes in me the new human event. And, even with Project Biome, regeneration being a big theme, and somehow that word regeneration, seeped into my consciousness about a year ago, that would be a theme for this event coming up for all the reasons that you shared. And even in the clinic, when I'm working with people over the years, the evolution seems like I'm often helping clear things out of people's systems without really adding a lot back in, and just letting their bodies do it. That if their body's not doing what it could, that something is blocking that. And then I've started thinking about more of the big picture in the same way. And so when I think about some of the intention for this event, it is about more, clearing space and sort of stripping things down a little bit to the the true raw nature of what we have, that we actually already have the things that we need for this new phase of humanity. If we can offload some of the things that are blocking that, like together in a group, when it becomes really powerful to make a really, beautiful imprint, but then we all get to be in our lives individually in that way. That I am working on simplifying my life where possible. And in the past, I made it just complex. And not that I was a huge materialist or anything, but I was, gifted some really challenging experiences over the last 5 years, and being liberated of a lot of things that I felt I had ownership of. And it taught me so much. And it actually did bring me back to my more true nature. I would say that I feel more like me now than I did then, and that I have a greater capacity to bring things forward into the world, events perhaps as part of that. And so there's always so much alchemy happening, whether we want it or not. And, come back to the analogy of the river, of being in that river together, and there's banks and twists and turns, but I'm really curious to see where that brings all of us. And I am curious to see about, the expression, and then the innovations, going back to some of the projects that you're involved in on a macro level, and then as you evolve individually within your own system.
Yeah, that was a great monologue right there. I liked everything in there. There's such a beautiful reality where you started there with the animals, the consciousness of the bear you mentioned. It's a funny week for that for me, because my folks live just about a mile through the woods from my place here in Virginia, and they had a black bear tear apart their chicken coop and kill 15 of their 20 chickens the last couple of days. And so my folks were a bit traumatized after that situation. And a similar thing happened to my brother, who's nearby as well, last year with it. And so you see nature do these devastating things that seem like such a problem, such a crisis. But when you stop thinking about the globe caring about chickens and realize that the globe cares about life, globe doesn't care about humans, the globe cares about life. Nature is a single consciousness. So there's no such thing as human consciousness. But the crisis of the human awareness at this point is that we believed our consciousness to be separate and superior to everything else, and that led to this, what's called divine law or divine right, where we could kill everything because we're smarter, and we can destroy this planet because God's going to come back and take us to some other heaven. And so we developed all these beliefs and myths around it's fine to destroy everything. We own it, or we're the smartest, therefore we own it. When you step back and realize there's simply a conscious planet that's evolving energetically all of the time through this sacred design that's within nature itself. The divine, the God is in everything. There's no way it's separate from. So whatever your thought process or experience is around God, what that word ultimately describes is the intelligence of nature, coming into its own witness, for nature to be able to see her own beauty through the manifestation of biology and life that would then be able to be seen and see back to source. And so the source code that is nature started before the planet, started before this universe. So what is that thing? Surely it's not a man floating in space, because it predates man. So if God isn't a man, then what is it? And I think what we're slowly getting our heads wrapped around, it is the witness. It is the nature that can see the nature. And we've proven this in physics now, that nothing is actually in particle state until it's witnessed. And so the fact that we have a whole universe that's being manifested in particle state with 2.5 trillion galaxies, each one with 1 billion suns, each one with planets and asteroids and everything else, like the scale of what has manifested in this universe proves that it is being witnessed. It could not turn into particle state without the witness. And so what is the witness? The witness is what I would call God. And so the witness is the ability of nature to see itself. And that's a beautiful thing. And it's ultimately in the pursuit of beauty. And so when we see beauty, or when beauty is witnessed, which at the physics level is really manifest by symmetry and complexity of design. And so that sacred geometry that's within space, that's within our own atoms, within our own atomic structure, within everything that we build, all of that sacred geometry down from the fractals of the quantum field of invisibility to the astrophysics of relativity out of the greatest scales, everything is beauty, and it's fractals of beauty, and it's learned to witness itself. And in witnessing it, it's become more and more particle state with each witnessing. This is what we are here to do, is to witness the beauty and participate in the manifestation of the next thing. And if we do stop to witness the beauty, we get to be part of the creation force. We get to be part of that divine force that we might call God by the fact that we are capable of witnessing the beauty. And so if you are feeling uncreative today, if you're feeling stuck, if you feel unloved, if you don't even remember what love feels like at this point because you're so frustrated and so isolated and feel so hopeless for humanity and the planet, go outside, lay down on your back, look up through the leaves of a tree at the blue sky behind it. There's a fractal pattern that happens between branches, leaves, and sky that will reset your neurology and allow you to start to witness the sacred geometry that's at these fractal levels. The same thing that's happening in the back of your eye is happening in the shimmering of the leaves, is happening through the branching pattern of the tree, is happening in the cosmic forces that are out there in deep space. And so you realign yourself with fractals of beauty. Breathe in the experience of what it feels like to witness the beauty of the trees and the leaves and the sun shining through it, the white clouds overhead. That moment, you become the force of nature that witnesses the beauty. And in so doing, you will generate the frequency that we call love or unconditional love. And that unconditional love becomes the thing that realigns your biology to its original design that you knit yourself together with in the womb of your mother. This is the loops we go on through our journey of intrinsic health and these other programs we're running now. It takes milliseconds to realign to the creative forces within this world, within this universe that we have called God, that we've called angels, that we call aliens, that we call all these things. Those are just human words that are put around the fact that biology is exploding all over the place with beauty, complexity, and it has an equal amount of dark and light. So we like to think that darkness is evil and light is good. It's just polarity. And we can be participating in the beauty of the balance of nature. Darkness is not evil. Darkness is an enormous amount of unfocused light. It's called vector equilibrium in physics. And so when all of the forces that could emit light, which is the electromagnetic field, are in a vector equilibrium, meaning not in a linear motion towards any particular direction, but are now stable and static because of the lack of intention or the lack of intended direction, we call that darkness. And so if you see things around you that look evil, it's simply light that hasn't been directed. It's light that's yet to be moved. And so the way to move it is to witness it and love it. And so the very evils that we see around us are the things we've got to love back into reality. And in the clinic, cancer is the most common and most fearful enemy that we have to do this with. That cancer cell is not your enemy. It is not the evil lurking in your body. It is your cells. That is you. That is the shadow that is within you that has become disconnected from your original design. You need to love that back into the system. And so the cancer is not evil. Your government's not evil. These things that we think of evil are simply the parts of humanity, the parts of our reality that got disconnected from the original design, disconnected from the whole. And if we love them back in, they eliminate themselves. You've experienced this. If you go and really witness the beauty of somebody on the playground who's known as the bully and say, you know what? I think you're aching. I think you got a lot of hurt in there. But I can see that you're really wanting more community around you. You want friends, you want things. And if you just put yourself in those shoes for a moment, you can transform the bully into your best friend. And if you just say, you know what, I understand you're doing this to me, but that's really against the whole matrix of nature because I'm moving forward. You can move forward with me and we could do something together. We can create together. And so where's the evil in the life that you're seeing around you that you're so busy judging that simply needs to be loved back into the system? And if it's
Mhm.
so damaged and if it's so dysfunctional, like your government, United States, if you're so dysfunctional, stop casting it under the wheels of the proverbial school bus that Kamala is always talking about. And let's just get out of the bus for a moment together, have mercy on our lost politicians and the whole system, and invite the whole system to come back in natural balance, natural systems. Let's go walk together again. It's these people that need the most love, the ones that we throw up and love to damn and judge and all that. So it's our politicians, it's our public figures that end up in prison, it's our regulatory people that give us nightmares. These are the ones that need to be loved back in. These are the systems that have gotten most isolated from the natural system of human nature. And if we love it back in, if we see the beauty in everything, coherence happens and light is released from the darkest aspects of humanity.
Yeah. This element of, I guess, the concept of the witness, that is, I think, one of the things I enjoy the most of, a chat like this and being in person, whether it's events or traveling or just bumping into somebody at the grocery store, that if the soul needs a witness to bring that forward, to express that beauty fully, and, I've heard you speak about this before, then that is so potent as a catalyst for changing things. And, when I think of my patients that come in that are, maybe in a frequency that is creating a lot of dysfunction in their system, that is something I've been working on, is just witnessing them in their highest expression and their beauty, and they transform really quickly. And it's like the most miraculous thing that I get to see. And this happens all over the place. And then I imagine, well, who's been witnessing me where I go, and what does that bring forward in me? And, so these parts, just from a micro point of view, and, I know we're going to aim to wrap up here pretty soon from a timing point of view. Is there anything that I can, or our listeners can, witness in you, maybe parts of you that maybe need to be witnessed in their beauty a little bit more, some aspect we can bring some more love into for you?
That's sweet. Thank you. I really don't feel separate from any of you, I guess is how it feels right now. I don't feel any need left in my body or mind or spirit anymore. I've just come to a really lovely place in the last couple months of my life, and I'm so satisfied with every experience I've ever had, and I'm so impressed with the most difficult things that I created for myself in my life. I love the way that those unfolded in my life, and I love what I learned from those, and so I'm ready. I'm ready to keep going, I think, at this point. And yeah, I'm ready just to be witness to what comes next, I guess is the big thing. I'm not doing anything anymore. I think I'm just getting better at being. And as soon as we become aware that the future is going to emerge for us rather than it's something we have to go do, we're going to stop making the short-sighted mistakes and the micromanagement, issues that we always create when we're trying to control the future or create the future. So I have a deep sense of just stillness in me right now that is new, and I hope for all of you to experience it. I didn't know what it would feel like. I assumed I knew what stillness was, I guess, before the last few months, but I'm in a very blessed moment of extreme stillness inside of myself, and it's an interesting thing to stop striving. And I've been a very driven personality, I think most people would tell you, and especially the people that are closest to me over the last half a century. I think I've driven some of them absolutely crazy with the amount of ideas and, constant building something or other in the garage or somewhere and just doing all the time. As you become still and start to be, my creativity now has less urgency to it and is being so much more effective. Like, I can see myself launching companies now with a fraction of the effort, without any of the stress that I used to go through in starting a new company or starting a new project. It just feels like play at some point when we get still enough. It's just like oh my gosh, it's just so fun to witness what comes through a human being, including myself, but those people around me. Surround yourself by people that are starting to learn how to be still and therefore be more themselves. And in being more themselves, they become so much more creative versions of themselves in nature that it just kind of boggles your mind how fast things can change and can transform. And so I would encourage community to all of us. And so be part of my community if you want. I've got this community online now. It's called Journey of Intrinsic Health. You can take the online human experiences for the 8 weeks and coaching and all that too. But you can just join the little cheap membership thing so that you can join all of our calls every week. And it's so vibrant to be part of this group. When I join in this Q&A session that we do every month, like I learn so much every time because it's 2 hours of questions from this global community. It reminds you that consciousness is not coming through you as an individual. It's not. Intelligence is not expressing itself through you as an individual. It's a phenomenon of nature that's expressing itself through all of humanity at once. And when you connect yourself to a couple thousand people that are in that space of stillness and have recorrected their abandonment disorder and they're starting to really feel the abundance that's coming through them around them, it's a rich, rich experience. And so tap in if you want, join if you want, but find that somewhere. Find a group of people that are starting to be still and be less convinced that they've got the answers or they're going to go fix everything. We just watch nature now emerge from us, and we're going to create a much different human society. And I'm blessed to be part of it.
I'm very blessed to be in this conversation with you and feeling that frequency that you're bringing and the person that you've become, the frequency that you've become to share with all of us. And I know you've collaborated a little bit with Richard Rudd, the author of the Gene Keys, and I'm a fan of the Gene Keys. And Gene Key 52, the highest expression is stillness. And that's in the position in my chart of my life's work. And the old Chinese hexagram of that was mountain over mountain. And I do find whenever I'm stressed, and the shadow is stress actually, and, when I stop breathing properly, if I can orient myself to that vision of the mountain over mountain, then I start to feel that frequency, and I feel that frequency just alive and well here. And so thanks for sharing that with us and for becoming that frequency as a beautiful beacon. And gosh, I know I could chat with you for hours, and I just feel so honored to share this time and space with you. And we're really looking forward to receiving you in Okanagan and BC here, and doing our best to create a field of stillness in the mountains and with the lakes and the rivers. And, we all get to be filled up together and witness each other. So I appreciate you very much, Dr. Zach.
So looking forward to being there with you guys. One of my favorite parts of the planet. And you also have one of my favorite friends coming too with Charles Eisenstein. So
yes, we do.
I'm really excited to be with you and Charles and the whole gang that shows up. So to all of you listening, actually, I'm not clued in to know if there's still spots available, but boy, if there are, you better jump in and get some tickets because we're going to have one heck of a time together.
It's a combination of stillness and a party, I guess, is what we can weave together.
That's what we're going to do. That is what stillness ends up feeling like. I mean, it's the more still you get, the more hilarious and celebratory the atmosphere has to become, I think. It's real.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, my friend, we'll sign off here and, wish you well in the journey until we get to see each other in person. And thanks for listening, everybody.